Mona, can you hear me okay?
Oh, yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you fine.
Okay, yeah. No, I just don't have my camera on, but yes, thank you.
All right, so we'll get started. One of the hot topics in our area, especially in like Seattle recently, has been condoizing or adding ADUs. And so Tony had a great idea of bringing Jeff in here today to teach us all a little bit more about it so we can be more educated and help our agents with also if they have a client or themselves that are looking to condoize properties. So we have Jeff McCann, he's real estate and land use consultant. And we'll let you go ahead and take it away.
Great. Okay. I'm going to see if I can still share my screen. Is that sharing now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. My name is Jeff McCann, and I usually have my remote, but one of the things, so school starts this week, and I figured out last quarter when I left my clicker in my bag, the batteries are now dead. So thank goodness I learned this today and not next week when I'm talking. So my background is I'm a affiliate instructor at the University of Washington in the Runstead Department of Real Estate. I've been doing this my fourth year teaching there. They actually have a school of real estate. People didn't know that. You can get an undergraduate degree in it or a master's degree in real estate. I had done their master's in construction management before 20 years ago, and then went back and did their master's in real estate. And they asked me to teach. So I teach transactions development, economics and market analysis for undergraduates and the graduate students. I've been a broker, real estate broker for 29 years now, and I'm a land use consultant. People say, well, what is that? I mean, I help people try and figure out what the highest and best use for their land is. And I earned the designation of ADU specialist last Friday. I'm not quite sure what exactly that means. I've been teaching this class in different forums. And one thing here is I tell people, like, I know a part of this. The best thing I can probably tell you is build your team. When I've taught this class, sometimes there's a policy person. There's a person with this particular city. I do land use feasibility. And then someone else will do the designer, the architect. Then we'll have a builder speak. And then we'll have the attorney speak on condoization or condoizing, an insurance person, a lender there. And so there's a whole realm of things. And I tell people I know a certain amount about it, but there's a lot of things I'm going to say I don't know, or it depends. So, I mean, where did this whole thing come about? They've been trying to do ADUs for years or more housing. And as we all know, there's a housing shortage. There's tremendous numbers. You look, whether you're into Seattle, King County, the Puget Sound region, we have a housing shortage. There was a lot of times when people wanted to do things like create middle housing, or it was allowed, but there were other things that prevented it. Certain cities may have had codes that we'll talk about that actually said you could do it, but you need parking requirements. You need owner occupancy. You need certain things that made it actually not penciled to do. Maybe if you're building for your, parents to move in, aging parents in place, special need kids, you did it because it didn't make financial sense. But and I mentioned that my daughter got married here a couple of weeks ago. Her and her husbands are college graduates. If they move back here, they would not be able to afford housing around Bellevue, Seattle. It just wouldn't be affordable to them. They'd be spending a lot more of their, income towards it. They'd end up moving, as I often say, drive south until you could afford it, to some of my clients. And it's taking too long to build up our housing stock. We have permit delays. It takes time to develop. I've purchased and developed 1,000 acres of property for my family alone in King County. It is hard, and it's challenging, it's time consuming, and the costs and the delays just add up often. And the interest carry, someone may be paying on their loan, and someone would rather have a patio or an extra bedroom in the home rather than pay for 8 months of delays in permitting. So the goal that we want to see here coming out of these House bills is that we have more housing options quicker, and also who's making the money on this. So I always tell, when I teach my students, if I can get them to stay awake, usually I have an air horn or a sound maker that's up on my desk. That one, it's got the laughter things that tells them when I gave a joke. Usually it's an 80s movie reference that they may not get. But I tell real estate agents, investors, homeowners, there's buried treasure in your backyard if you can find it. Now, sometimes it's not buried treasure, it's a buried oil tank, and that's not the treasure you want to find. So part of, on any property is looking at, feasibility for that particular lot. So we talk about middle housing, and some people know, like what you guys said, some middle housing, know what it is, heard of it, don't know what it is. Yeah, a lot of that where I hear that where, what is middle housing? We hear the term missing middle housing and middle housing. So we adopted the middle housing bill. We have single family detached homes, right? You get that. At the other end, we may have large multifamily apartments, but we have a lot of that middle housing in between that we may be missing. Duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes. A lot of times zoning prohibited the ability to do it. I'll share my slides with anyone afterwards so you guys can have these for yourself. And so a lot of the terms I often hear is gentle density. It's things going in that you may not stand out as much in a single family housing zone. Duplexes, triplexes, Now someone else may argue a sixplex next to your single family home might stand out quite a bit. But it's more of a gentle density. It fits in with the scale of the neighborhood better. There have been a lot of changes that are going on. We're just talking today about 1337, House Bill 1337. There's kind of a different bill, House Bill 1110, which people are confusing. 1110 is the middle housing bill. It's actually the duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, maybe sixplexes. You also have 1337, which is going to be the accessory dwelling units. But there's been 45 new laws passed or in the last 5 years on growth management. These are just a couple things going on. So I would say the changes create hopefully opportunity, and those that are learning about it have a chance to take advantage of the opportunities. So we're not get burned by it. So for accessory dwelling units, this was just more in the background. This is kind of a summary of what's coming. We'll talk about each of these. But big news that really is taking out some of those limitations. Back to it, there were times the cities were fighting changes for these, like 1337. Why would a city not want this? Do you have any ideas?
Yeah.
What's that?
Don't have the infrastructure for the growth, essentially.
Yep, some don't, NIMBY, yep. And so a lot of it was, this is the state coming to the cities and saying, thou shalt do. Very often we hear, and I'm a firm believer that often the cities may know more what they want. Maybe Covington knows what they want, and it's not appropriate what may be done in Seattle or Kirkland or Spokane. So now the state's coming in and saying what you're going to do. Cities fought against that. But the pressure mounted to different groups came together to kind of force the city's hands. But there's little tweaks that cities are going to have to be able to carve things out, maybe for parking or for infrastructure. So the big things are, when is this going to be adopted? So all the cities planning under the growth management have to do their comprehensive plan update. The first ones have to do it by December 31st of this year. Kings, Pierce, Snohomish included in those. So they're going to have to adopt what came about under House Bill 1110, the middle housing bill. If they don't, then the Department of Commerce has created a model code that they get to use until they adopt one. So they can't just not do it. House Bill 1337 with the accessory dwelling units, they're going to have to allow certain things. So they'll adopt it this year. They have to implement within 6 months after adoption. Kent has already adopted their ADU code. So you can already go there in Kent. Some cities have already adopted. I don't know where, each of the individuals, people ask me, well, when will Bellevue, when will Kirkland, when will Seattle, follow all those. I would encourage whatever jurisdictions you're working primarily and follow those and get involved there. A lot of them are not adopted yet. Now it's late to give input. They've been doing this for 2 years, but it's still better now than never. So we'll see them adopted coming up. They're going to allow 2 ADUs on residential lots within the urban area. So this does not count towards the rural areas. So this is going out into, the unincorporated King County. I have a lot of people that want to do ADUs there. This doesn't apply to them the same way. King County may adopt things, and we're hoping they do. And there's some changes I'm hearing coming on ADUs in the rural area, but they're not mandated under House Bill 1337. So ADUs are going to be 1,000 square feet minimum. You don't need to have owner occupancy, maybe sold as independent units. We'll get into this with condoizing or condo minimizing. Parking is going to change, and impact fees. So one, feel free to interrupt me at any time. I can't see if anyone on screen has a question, so just let me know. I'll stop and answer something. I use terms ADUs because I use them all the time, DADUs, ADUs, AADUs, and I sometimes forget that not everyone's living this every day, so stop me. So we'll stop there for a minute. We have accessory dwelling units is just a form, is a term. We have terms we use here that as I went to a conference that brought people in from Portland and California and Texas, they don't use our same terms. We say DADU, a detached accessory dwelling unit. That term isn't used, as far as I know, outside of Washington. So as Terry Wilson will say, and Terry's the condo person, it's the wild, wild west. We're making up terms as we go along. So in Seattle, they call it an AADU, an attached accessory dwelling unit, or a DADU, a detached accessory dwelling unit. But certain jurisdictions may not recognize or think about the term DADU, but they're all accessory dwelling units, whether it's attached or detached. So here's a map showing when the first ones are going to be adopted. And again, Snohomish, King, Pierce, Kitsap County are all going to be adopting their comprehensive plans by December 31st of this year. So they must implement those within 6 months, so no later than June 30th of 2025. Yes.
It's washing out your slides.
Yeah, there you go.
All right.
Thanks.
Good. So must allow two ADUs on a legal lot in zoning districts which allow single-family homes within the UGA. So places can still limit whether they're going to allow. I mean, Seattle right now allows an attached and a detached. They're actually talking about changing theirs to go to two detached, like Kirkland does. But some places could have that restriction that they're going to have, one attached and one detached. I hope that cities give the most flexibility to choose here so we can make things fit on particular properties. Duplexes, triplexes, townhomes may have ADUs. This is kind of unique where I know some people are starting to go look for duplexes or multifamily that could fit another ADU on it. It was maxed out for whatever they had, but maybe you could buy it, add an accessory dwelling unit or two, condo those off and sell them. So just a little niche deal that may work for certain properties. And there's always things about, there's certain things they have to meet, lot size, and there's other restrictions that may prohibit or limit based upon like septic and critical areas. So not every lot, if it's got critical areas and septic, is going to be allowed to do this. So the allowance of at least 1,000 square feet. One of the difficulties before, master builders did a good thing trying to keep up with what different jurisdictions had for accessory dwelling units. It was all over the board. Every city seemed to have their own limit on what you could do. Kirkland was 1,200. Seattle was 1,000 square feet. Someone else was 850, 800, 450. So now there's going to be a minimum that ADUs, that jurisdictions will have to allow at least 1,000 square feet. Now, someone can choose to build less. Maybe you only want 850 or 600, but they have to allow for 1,000 square feet. Kirkland allows 1,200. Seattle is talking about going to 1,500, which is great. Question?
I was curious, because I've got a client who just bought a house. The house is really small, and there's an opportunity to build a pretty big patio in the back. It's bigger than the house. Does the house then become the?
You can. This is actually a great opportunity, especially if they go into 1,500 square feet. So here's the thing, kind of jumping ahead. Pro tip: if you know someone, an opportunity maybe to go if they allow you. Seattle's talking about allowing 1,500 square foot for a DADU. You can go buy a home in Seattle that's 1,500 square feet. Now, condo it, sell off the front home, which will future be the DADU, and then go build 2,000 square foot homes or 1,500 square foot homes on the back. But yes, many times now the primary home, what was always the primary home, could become, in people do it now, that home may only have been 900 square feet. So they're making that the, one of the accessory dwelling units, building a detached one in the back. So there's different creative ways that you can do this. May not require public street improvements as a condition of them. This is interesting too. So I looked at a site in Kirkland for a client here recently. Someone came to my class, had a property in Kirkland, allows 2 dadoos. Everything looked really good. It's on a side street, had a really wide side yard. Home was positioned to one side. This is a slam dunk, right? Went to the city jurisdiction, talked to them on the counter. They're like, oh yeah, easy, dude, 2 dadoos over here. Then they told me, well, 2 things. One, you only get 1 curb cut in Kirkland right now. So you got to use that side entry, that driveway there, and you'd have to walk all the way around. There's no way to really get to the dadoos. And if your dadoos have a certain amount of improvement value to the overall property, you have to do frontage improvements. That means she was have to go back and not only fix any broken curb and gutter, she would now have to add sidewalk and a landscape strip that wasn't going to connect to anything. So that actually made her project go from a slam dunk winner to, I'm not going to do this, or I'm going to hit pause. So hopefully we get all these things in here that Kirkland will take that out. And other jurisdictions don't try and find ways to add burdens to doing these. May not require own occupancy status. This was another one that many jurisdictions required the owner to occupy either the primary or the dadu. Seattle had this and actually recorded restrictions on it. They will become unenforceable, even if they're on your title going forward, is what I'm told. But going forward now, they can't require that as well. So investors and others can go ahead and do this. Question?
Just a quick one. That situation in Kirkland, do you know if the city would, like, if they had to add the sidewalk out front, would the city be doing it from the perspective of, like, our city crew has to do it at this price, or you can contract it out to somebody else to do it? Do you know if they had any requirements, like, if
I think it was required. I think the homeowner was going to have to do it. I don't think you were in a contract with the city. We didn't get into that level, but I'm sure they're saying during your construction you're going to go do it. I don't know that the city has a crew that goes and builds new sidewalks on, because they would just call it a development. I think like subdividing the land. So owner developer requirement to do. Short-term rentals is one that's coming up, that there could still be restrictions on the use of these as short-term rentals. It's essentially listed like Leavenworth will allow Airbnbs, but not short-term rentals. And to me, somewhat an Airbnb kind of looks like a short-term rental, but that's allowed, but not the use of ADUs as accessory dwelling units. This is going to be, it depends by your jurisdictions. One city may allow it, another one may not allow it. So as I said earlier, they cannot prohibit the separate sales of ADUs. And this makes, when I'm hearing people from Portland and Los Angeles, I had a guy who was a ADU influencer. I've been watching his videos for like a year. He does a really good job. He came to this conference and I wanted to go hear him speak the other day. And he was telling me he only came to hear Terry Wilson speak. They don't allow this in Oregon. So the separate sale of the condoizing, the condominiumization, the condoing, those are all made up terms, right? That we have made up here in Washington to describe it. And it's funny because Terry and I have been saying condominiumization, and I always slip up on that word. And I heard all the guys from Portland and California call it condoizing. I'm like, that's easier to say, but my mouth hasn't quite got there yet. But condoing, but you're going to, and the one thing that Terry will say, and Terry, there's a video here. If you want to watch it, he explains how to do this. It's a little bit dated. We did the video 2 years ago. Certain things have changed into it, but the ability to take a piece of property and do your ADUs, do your accessory dwelling units, and condo them, create separate ownership. And as Terry says, a condominium, it's a form of ownership. Most of us think about condos, from painting on a building in a high-rise tower. Think of this as just a form of ownership. You can condo anything. You can condo the parking lot, and every parking stall can be its own unit. And you could sell it. Now, you can't get a building permit for it. So it used to be if you can't, Terry used to say, if you can get a permit for it, I can condo it. Well, now we can condo anything, even before it's there. So as I was mentioning, some people might, knowing what the city of Seattle is doing, go start buying properties. You can do it now, right? You don't have to wait for the new thing. Buy property, condo off the property, the backyard, sell the front unit right away, hold the back unit, and then go get a building permit to build your dad use. Now, there's risks in condoing early, because if you condo and sell off the front unit and you don't give yourself proper access to get back there later, you may have to go back and talk with that person. So I think I would generally recommend, if you want to go this process, that you can get permits for everything, so you know how all the utilities and all the work is going to be done, so you don't have to go back later and ask a neighbor for it. But you don't have to. Many people say, I don't want to condo it, I just want to do an accessory dwelling. Why would I do that? Well, it can create more equity. That if you go and you do if you get an appraisal for a home and 2 accessory dwelling units, but it's all on one tax lot, then they may give you additional value there. But if you can sell those individual units, the accessory dwelling units in Kirkland could be going for $1 million, $1.2 million, right? And in Seattle it could be $850. So if you can take those and you build a unit for a certain amount, say $350, and all your other costs, maybe you're in at $400, $450, and you could sell it for $700,000. So part of it's what you paid for the dirt and how you do it. So you can do this. It's not a requirement. It's just what I say is what it made the others of saying Seattle, when they had fully adopt House Bill 1337, is going to be the most progressive, the most, the easiest, the best state to do accessory dwelling units in. Most people who have land don't realize that now. So you have investors out there looking to gobble these up. I'm going to do a research paper with the city of Seattle and a professor at the UW, where we're going to look at who's doing these. Is it the homeowner that's getting the wealth? Is it the investors, right? I mean, I hope the homeowner realizes there's value in their backyard before some investor knocks on the door and takes it. I'm all for capitalism. I'm a developer, right? I may do some of that myself, but I do hope that I teach these classes a lot for brokers to educate their clients that they have value there. Before you give it away, understand that value, price it in. Maybe you want to do it by yourself. Maybe you don't, but there's value there. Parking. This is going to be a little bit dependent upon city. This is another thing that a lot of jurisdictions in the past have slowed up the ability or prohibited the ability to go do ADUs. Again, if you could only have one curb cut and it can't be wider than 20 feet, how do you really fit additional parking? If an accessory dwelling unit is going to require 1 or 2 additional parking spaces, and they require off-street parking. So one, it may be dependent on how close you are to transit or the size of the lot. But this is another thing that I would say that whatever jurisdiction you're working in, it depends, look to that jurisdictions. And I hope cities are going to look for ways to make this work rather than inhibit the production of ADUs. Other barriers and other regulations, we have setbacks, building coverage, tree retention, height limits. These are all things that other jurisdictions have done that that really limit the ability for people when you say, can I go do it? Well, if there's a height limit that doesn't work, if I have to keep this tree, if I'm not allowed to have more than a certain amount of lot coverage, FAR, on a property, even if I can do accessory dwelling units, but the lot coverage doesn't allow me to do any more impervious surface or coverage of the lot, then I really can't do it. The conversion of existing structures. There's another one that there's a lot of unpermitted ADUs out there, right? That people may have been renting it. I bought one and rented. My first purchase of this was in 2012. Terrence Wilson, the attorney, was my surveyor at the time. And he gave me a bunch of cassette tapes and said, hey, I just heard about this new thing. And I'm listening to the cassette tapes from some legal seminar he went to, and it talked about doing this. So I went and looked for properties that already were built, right? Because they weren't going to I could condo them, but I would never get a building permit from the city of Renton. So I went and found an illegal non-conforming piece of property that had 3 homes on it. City of Renton didn't realize this, but under King County, before they annexed it, they kept issuing building permits. I don't know who was asleep at the wheel, but they were legally permitted, but no longer conform to what the zoning allows. So I went to the city of Renton. They said, you have to tear 2 down unless you own or occupy 1 and move into it. I did not want to live in these units. This was strictly for a rental. So I airspace condoed it and said, actually, Renton, thanks for your input. I don't need it. The state manages the condo thing. So they did make me do a minimum housing inspection, which I was, did and worked out for me. But there could be other things here that could prohibit or limit. So these are things that we want to see that, again, give flexibility. The goal here is to produce more, I'll call it attainable housing. One of the words I don't like is affordable housing. So kind of one of my tangents, I go to my students, people talk about affordable housing. I say there's capital A affordable housing and lowercase a affordable housing. This is just my own thinking. Capital A affordable housing, you're doing something in exchange for getting something from the government. Tax rebates on your property, but we're going to give you no property taxes or something in exchange for keeping these limited on income. That's capital A affordable housing. Lowercase a, it's just affordable to people. But what I say is affordable and you think is affordable can be different. A $1.2 million ADU in Kirkland, is that affordable? First of all,
Isn't the median 1.4 now?
so I always tell my students one thing. There's a test at the end of all my classes, right? You have to know three things. It depends. That's the correct answer to 3/4 of my test question. Should I buy this, Mr. McCann? It depends. Should I sell it? Is it a good investment? It depends, right? So it depends is the right answer to about everything. Is it affordable? It depends. It depends on if you're looking at what the primary home's going for 2.4. 1.2 in Kirkland's very affordable. That's not affordable to a lot of other people out there. So the other two things you have to know is 43,560. Anyone know what that is?
Well, that's 1 acre.
1 acre. Yeah, bing, bing, bing. Someone online got that, right? So, and then the last thing is ZATSUM, which I'll get to as the last thing. We're going to analyze these properties. So conversion of interior ADUs or unpermitted ADUs, getting them permitted, there's a whole bunch of work that can be done there, but there's a lot of unpermitted ADUs that the ones I bought were permitted structures, but actually in the garage, they sublet the garage out and the oven was hooked up to the garage door. So if you hit the garage door opener, the oven would have come up over the top. Luckily, they unplugged the garage door opener when they rented out the garage, and they jackhammered into the concrete, a toilet line going out. So, there are a lot of things that were unpermitted about this. 3 units. I have 3 units there and off of 116th in the Fairwood Cascade area that I rent out. Been a great rental for me. I condoed them, individual tax parcels. I could sell those at any time. I'm just keeping them as rentals. It created a bunch of equity because I could sell those. Whatever I bought each unit kind of for, now I could sell them for 2 to 3 times the amount of my basis I put into them. In the meantime, 10 years of good rental on them. So, the investor at the time will figure out when the time to sell is. So another thing that had been imposed before were design standards, and that they can't impose design standards stricter than that for the principal residence. So I was helping someone in unincorporated King County, an older couple, disabled, wanted to move out of their big 4,000 square foot home and build an attached accessory dwelling units. Their kids were going to move into the main home and they were going to move into the ADU. And the big thing was to have everything on one floor. King County required that you could not have the front door of the ADU be on the same side of the house as the front door of the main home. So instead of this area where the parking is here, so the main home is here, here's the front door. We proposed the front door here. They wouldn't allow it. So we had to put a gravel walkway all the way around to the back side of the ADU. Think about this. Aren't we trying to create mobility and age in place? So it made no sense to me to have the front door of the ADU not on the same side as the main home. So that is going away. So those are just some of the design standards that different jurisdictions had used before, maybe with good intention, that they wanted to differentiate the ADU from the main home. Probably came from a point of concern that was valid, but when you put it in practical use, it made it less attractive. They're never going to use this ADU door. Now they'll probably just cut a new one in the front and make it work. Impact fees. So, impact fees, they fund infrastructure that may be needed. Development should pay for development. And so there's a lot of things, park impact fees, street impact fees, other impact fees that are required. They're going to impose a 50% limit of the principal unit. I'm doing a development down in Buckley right now, and the impact fees are $29,000 per lot, right, for all those. If we had to put all those impact fees on every accessory dwelling unit, it just goes into the cost that makes it less attainable or affordable. So there's still going to be impact fees, and certain things like the sewer won't be waived in any way, but we want to watch to see what the impact fees are. And I would encourage it. The ADU shouldn't be using as much as the infrastructure as a principal residence. So it makes sense not to put kind of a full share on those. It's imposed at 50%, right? So of the principal unit. So if you, whatever the principal unit is, it can't be more than 50% of that. And they can choose to go below that number. That's a jurisdiction can choose. We really want accessory dwelling units. We're going to waive those. Could be something the city might choose to do. So that was just going through House Bill 1110, just the code. Someone give me a time check on things too as I go through these. I've had to give these.
11:35.
So what time are we done here? I just.
Noon, 12:15.
Okay, good, easy to do. I have to give these sometimes as an elevator talk going down the elevator. Other times it's a 3-hour course. So I can go on for as long as we have here. So, and this next thing, this course, I'm actually creating a 3-hour clock hour course for brokers. I've said that for 3 years, and everyone says you've been saying that for 3 years. But I've just been busy with doing other things to create this course. But, and again, part of the whole, this works for any kind of vacant land, a single spot lot, an accessory dwelling unit, subdividing into 100 lots. This ZATSUM is just something I created, the word I just made up. 8 things everyone should know about land, and you should do feasibility before buying land or deciding to go forward. There's actually probably 1,000 things. I boiled it down to 8. I usually tell a joke about realtors can't remember more than 8 things, but if you can think of these things, your clients can, it'll help you eliminate probably half the properties you look at because you'll find a fatal flaw. And if we can eliminate the really bad ones, then we can, help our clients focus on the good ones. So each of these things is a $100,000 mistake a past client has made. Each of these, if they had known zoning or access or title, they would save themselves $100,000. So either a client or myself may have made these mistakes. I'm not telling you which ones were my $100,000 mistakes. You have these slides that we're going to go into each of these. Zoning, access, title, topography, soil, sensitive areas, utilities, market study. So ZATSUM. Think of those things when you go look at a piece of property, any land, and you can, again, eliminate, find a fatal flaw, or figure out what the challenges on that property is going to be. So first thing I always start with is zoning. Is it permitted by zoning? So before these House bills came in, accessory dwelling units may have been limited, prohibited, restricted in a certain way. So whenever I'm looking at a property, I want to know, what does the zoning allow? I want to comply with zoning. I don't want to fight zoning. I have people that ask me, can I rezone this property? Well, it depends, right? I mean, we could try anything. I have a person that wants me to rezone rural property into a gas station near Enumclaw. I'm like, I'd rather see you write a check for $50,000 to your favorite charity rather than making me and the county your favorite charity. I will help you with your feasibility, but I already kind of know the answer. So I start with permitted use table Kent, permitted use table Seattle, permitted use table Kirkland. You get a chart that looks something like this. You'll find something that, what are the allowed uses? P is usually a permitted use. A, maybe an allowed or accessory use, kind of a secondary use. C is a conditional use. If it's blank, it's not an allowed use in your zone. So you find your zone, you find what type of thing you want to do, you go across, and we figure out whether it's a permitted use. And then you get this little number here that may say, it's going to give you a restriction. That may have said an ADU can be done up to 800 or 1,000 square feet, or a certain amount of lot coverage. So the devil can be in the detail of the numbers. So starting with zoning, is what I want to do with a property an allowed use, conditional use, accessory use, or not a permitted use? And if it's not a permitted use and you don't own the property, unless you really know something about it or want it, I might go look at something else, save myself the time, effort, and energy. And then you want to look at, in there too, you'll find a matrix with like front yard setbacks and side yard setbacks and height limitations and maximum amount of impervious surface. So if a ground has grass on it right now and the rainwater can permeate through the ground, and I put a rooftop or I put a driveway there, concrete there, the water cannot permeate the surface. I've created impervious surface. So they're telling me what my limit on the impervious surface of a lot can be. So if there's already a home there and driveway, and now I want to go look at accessory dwelling units, is there room to actually do what I want to do? Do I remove some asphalt? Do they grandfather a certain amount in? So, that's something I'm going to go look at under the zoning part. And this gets back to the condo part. We kind of touched on how Terry did it, took a piece of land, created a principal unit and 2 accessory dwelling units. Some examples. Access. This is one that if you're subdividing property, do you have to or you have a property, do you have to cross over someone else's property? Am I right off a street? Do I have to cross over via an easement? For accessory dwelling units, do I have an alley in the back to access? Or am I, having to find a way along the side of a yard to access the back of the property? I would generally like to try and, if I'm going to do accessory dwellings, go buy something, keep the existing structure if it has value. But sometimes that structure is not in an optimal place to do accessory dwelling units. If it, is not scooted to one side, maybe it gives me a side yard to get down, get access to the back. Think about people that have to go, you put an accessory dwelling unit in the backyard that doesn't have an alley. Someone's got to carry groceries back there. Someone, if there's not a driveway to get back there, how are they actually going to do it? If there's some slope back there, up or down, how are we going to get that person day in and day out to do this? So a lot of lots, when you look at, aerial, may look just fine, and then you're looking at, the topography, which we'll get into, but we'll figure out, which lots make it much easier. So a lot of people go look immediately for alley access lots. If I'm going to go buy a piece of property for an accessory dwelling unit, and I can find something that I can access off the alley, I can keep, this is another one, great condo example. Condo off the front of that, and the dadoos, accessory dwellings coming off the alley, won't even necessarily feel like they're part of that front property anymore. They don't have to work together. But part of the whole part about planning is maybe the mailbox is in the front there. And so you do want to create a slight access, a 4-foot access pathway to get from the back to the front so you can get to your mailbox. Or where's the garbage pickup? Maybe it's in the back and in the alley, and that front person needs that access to be able to get back to take their garbage. So access can be huge on trying to get on, especially on a tight lot. Title report. This is something that usually brokers come up. Oh, I heard you cannot do accessory dwelling units on properties that have title restrictions. So the attorney just says, Jeff is always acting like an attorney. He says it depends to everything. And he will say, I could tell you something as an attorney that it doesn't depend. That if CC&Rs were not already created by last July, the implementation date, the effective date of the ordinance, communities cannot create new CC&Rs that prohibit accessory dwelling units. Now, if they're already on title, those still stand in place. But then he gets to, it depends, right? Then I catch him like, it depends on, he'll say, if they haven't been enforced over the years and you did no basketball courts were allowed and you have one, and you got a shed and you got a she shed and you got a garage addition that wasn't allowed and you got a 2-story home and only 1-story homes were allowed. Maybe those CC&Rs and restrictions are not being enforced, have not been enforced, and they can't selectively enforce it on someone now. So look at your CC&Rs. I have someone that wanted me to do a feasibility on a lot. I think they're in an area. I'll go look right away. I think they're in a community that has these prohibitions on accessory dwelling units, and I don't know that they've been violated. So that may be a quick answer to look at in a 15-minute feasibility, that you will not right now be allowed to do it. Now, there's some changes or some thoughts that potential change that we have covenants that were on there before. I sold a home in Kent a couple of weeks ago. It limited the sale to a Caucasian person. We know those aren't enforceable covenants. They're still there. One judge somewhere said, we're in a housing crisis. these old covenants about not allowing accessory dwelling units, maybe we should look at eliminating those. That's for a judge and someone else to figure out. So, but look at the title report. I gave you this example too, where here's a completely different on a feasibility study I did for someone. Found this waterfront property that was really undervalued for what we thought it would be. 12,000 square foot lot down here on the water, and going, well, Jeff, I don't know, I want to buy it, but look at this for me. And so we went and looked at the title report, and on this one, there was a recreational easement, an easement for enjoyment and purposes of picnicking, engaged in athletic events, and so, recorded on the property. Anyone know what this was? This is down near Mount Rainier. Anyone else have an idea? This was part of an old subdivision down near Mount Rainier that this was the park tract for the entire community. And so it's a legal lot. It was saleable, but it came with these conditions. Now, most of the lots that were developed here were on the lake already. So they probably didn't need to use this. It's been overgrown. No one's using it. But there's another 150 lots up here that are undeveloped that still have the right here. So what I was telling them was, you can go buy it. I don't see anything that would prohibit you from building a home, but all 150 people here would have the right to come down and picnic and engage in athletic events on your front lawn, and you can't prohibit them. Well, can I get that eliminated from title? Well, yeah, go ask 150 people to give up their right to picnic on your front yard. I bet you 149 out of 150 don't know they have the right, but you are now going to go tell them they do and ask them if they're willing to give it up. So he quietly decided he was just going to buy it, get a price reduction, and bought it. This another property I've worked on in Lake Chelan. Same thing, sells every few years. It's a 1 acre or half acre lot on Lake Chelan. It's a recorded picnicking area for the property I worked on across the street. Someone buys it from New York or Louisiana every couple of years and figures out they can't actually build anything on it, but they can go down and picnic with the neighbors on it. So just reviewing title. Topography, back to the whole thing. Seattle, full of mountains, hills. Some of the reasons where we love it is the mountains and everything here, but especially on small lots to an accessory dwelling units, it can be really difficult to work on lots that aren't flat. So obviously looking at a topography map, the closer the lines are together, the more it's going up or down. Looking at what those lines are they 2-foot contours, 10-foot contours, 20-foot contours, how steep it is. And getting back to the backyard again, how am I going to get people down? If I'm trying to create age in place, but I got steps going to the backyards, does that work? So, without alley access. So we'll, again, if you're looking at 5 or 10 properties for a client, I tell brokers, let's eliminate the ones that don't do what we want them to do and focus on the ones that can. So, the other thing is, a lot of these, you may have to shore your neighbor's property up. I've done it where I've done this in Seattle, and we're cutting down for a basement and we're putting in shoring, which could add in $40,000, $50,000 to the cost easily to this lot to keep the neighbor's swimming pool from coming in, or some sort of erosion or landslide hazard. Soils, same thing to look at. Most people look at the backyard, it's flat, great, I got a flat yard. Well, I'm a 3rd generation dirt contractor. So my grandfather started with 2 horses and a flatbed wagon, and we've been probably filling your backyard since the 1940s, and you don't know it. Or you don't know that someone before our truck would be going down the road, hey, can we get a load of dirt? I'll pay you $200 for it. And we may be like, this was allowed back in the day. You can keep the $200. Can we just put 10 dump truck loads of dirt back there, right? So we would dump it. And now if we're building, we have to compact in 12-inch lifts at 95% compaction. But it's for your backyard. You didn't care. We just dumped, 400 yards of dirt, and you just, run over it, but it's not compacted. You build on top of that unconsolidated fill, and you're going to have settlement. Out of college, I moved into a home in Issaquah on Mountain Park Boulevard. We drove up the hill up onto the parking area, and I noticed a cone sticking out of the concrete. So I was like, that's odd. I reached down, pulled the cone out from under the concrete, and below that was another concrete slab. Driveway, dirt, concrete slab. And then I looked below that, dirt, concrete slab. there had been 3 driveways poured. When they built the home, they reached into the hillside where all the trees and stumps were, and they took the tree and the stump and all the bushes, and they dumped it into the non-buildable area of the driveway. Over the years, those huge stumps are decaying, that ground is sinking, water from the hill wasn't directed around, and so the concrete slab is sinking down. So, you know, whether it's my family putting dirt in your backyard or there's an oil tank or there's something back there, excavation is expensive to haul this. You may be hauling the dirt from here to Ravensdale, right? That may be the closest dump site you're now taking it to. How are we going to get a machine back there to excavate it? So, you know, it's important to know what's under the dirt and what you're going to do with it. Sensitive areas, we have a lot of streams, wetlands, erosion hazards, steep slope hazards, trees. Trees are a big one. Mercer Island is a big place. Seattle on trees. Certain cities that I've built homes completely around trees before. And do you have a lot of room? What's an exceptional tree? What's a protected tree? What Seattle has for an exceptional tree may be different than Mercer Island. Probably is. Different than Kirkland. What tree can I cut down? What tree can I not? When it gets over it's a certain species, a certain diameter, DBH, diameter breast height, it becomes a protected tree. Can I cut it? Maybe, maybe not. So these are some of the things that you have to, you know, look at when looking at. And anyone here ever developed down in Thurston County? I got my Caddyshack deal here. The pocket gopher. The western pocket gophers are protected endangered species in Thurston County. Before going and doing a development there, I have to go do a pocket gopher study during certain months of the year, I think mating season. And if you have them, I've got to protect every pocket gopher hole. I did a $20 million acquisition for a client, and I had become the pocket gopher expert because we sold off the wetlands critical areas to the Department of Ecology or someone, Fish and Wildlife, and they went and imported 1,000 pocket gophers. We were doing a mine on the next property. We put no trespassing signs. Those little buggers did not read our no trespassing signs, and they burrowed onto our property. All of a sudden, we had endangered species on our property where we didn't have them before. So back to, it depends on, you know, what are critical areas and sensitive areas, how much can impact your project. You know, check your jurisdictions. Wetland buffers and boundaries change all the time. Just because your neighbors did it doesn't mean that you can, because the codes might have changed. Utilities. Are there already utilities on the street? I've done it. We're doing spot lots in Bellevue here where it's got this old clay ceramic tile side sewer going to the house. It's corroded. It's broken. Now I can't tie in easily into my accessory dwelling unit into it. And so now I got to chase that out to the street and fix it, right? Is the property on septic? Is it, a lot of my people I deal with may be on septic and well. Can I put the accessory dwelling unit on the existing septic? It depends. Probably not. You know, can I tie them onto the existing well? It depends. Does it meet today's well standards? So a lot more of the infill lots we're doing with accessory dwelling units would try and tie into utilities. Seattle, if you have water, you get 1 meter for your accessory dwelling units, and then you can sub-meter behind it, but you're going to have 1 meter. You go to other places like Kirkland, they may not manage all their own utilities. They may have North Shore or someone else that does their water, and that jurisdiction may require multiple meters out there. Does that meter now meet, it met residential code, but now the fire department wants fire sprinklers, and now you got to go from a 3/4 inch meter to a 1 inch meter, and there's $30,000 that you're going to do to upsize that meter for fire. So, you know, all the things that you're going to want to look at for utilities. Do I got to go in the street to replace it, improve it, upsize it? I had a lot in Covington, right off Kent Kangley. There was a sewer manhole 3 lots away. We thought easy. All the lots where we were at were on septic, but the sewer is real close. We'll tie into it. But we figured out the invert elevation. The invert bottom of the manhole was a foot above where our lot was. Wasn't a great amount of slope, but just enough. And we know which way sewage wants to go, right? Downhill. And the sewer district did not allow pumping to the manhole. And so we said, well, great, we can't pump, right? You won't allow, we want to do that, but you won't allow it. Can we do septic on the lot? Well, you gave us a waiver. They said, no, there's another manhole available to you. So sewer's available. You have to connect to that next closest manhole. it was 5,100 feet away. Anyone know how far a mile is? Yes. So we were 180 feet short of a mile away. They said, I said, what's that going to cost? They said, we've already had this question asked, $800,000.
Oh.
Right? So $800,000 for a single family lot in Covington. And so, you know, it goes back to where the utilities at, can you connect to them? My intern will go out with me and I'm in the street, like block traffic, and I'm pulling up manhole lids and stuff like that. Try to put my head down some of these to try and figure out which way pipes go. A lot of the information is now on GIS. You can get utility plans from them. So go look at your jurisdiction to see what they allow. Drainage is another one. Managing storm drainage on your property is another one. It's going to take someone to help you figure that out. So all these things aside, we go through zoning, access, title, topography, soil sensitive areas, utilities, and now we do a market study. Does it make sense to do? I often get called the dream popper giving these talks because I say I'm a dream poker, not the dream popper. I'm going to poke your idea. Does it make sense to do? If you have, I have a special needs child. If wanted them to live with me, it's not about the money. But if you're doing this for an investment, we need to know that it makes financial sense to do. And what your rate of return or your investor's rate of return is. So looking back at all this to see, you know, at the end of the day, are we making money in doing this or not? Because if we're going to look for our clients for 10 properties, we want to cherry pick the 2 or 3 best that's going to have the best chance of results. So what I end up doing for a lot of people is a feasibility study. And I always tell people, build your team. I only know a certain amount of this whole part. I do land use consulting, developing, construction management. And so I can help in that element. I'm not a builder. I've built things before, but you know, when you talk about cost per square foot and interior remodels, that's a different person on your team. Your team should involve a surveyor, a land use consultant, a wetlands consultant, a builder, an architect, an insurance person, a lender. Those are all people part of your team. So a lot of times I help people, I'll do the feasibility study for them to figure out what needs to be done. Is this a good lot, challenging lot? How much time do we need for feasibility to study this? So I go back to, again, telling them ZATSM, and there's things people always tell me you left out. You don't specifically have survey or tree, your arborist. I'm like, they're mixed in here. But again, I can't have the entire alphabet. There's probably 1,000 things that go into feasibility for doing these, but this is the biggest 8 that I want you to kind of leave with. Brokers always ask me, how long should feasibility last and how much should it cost? And I say the length of time for feasibility and the dollar should reflect the number of questions you have to get answered. If you give me a lot that was recently subdivided, all the utilities are in the street, I can do that feasibility in, a week. If we need to figure out, does the soil perk for drainage and for septic, and we got an exceptional tree, and we got a wetland, and we got a pocket gopher. Again, if it's a mole, I can gas it. If it's a pocket gopher, protected radius around its hole. So, and here's a couple. I have people can screenshot this. Terry's talk is excellent in telling people about the ability to condo minimize property. I also do I do this feasibility video I did on YouTube for my students for a homework assignment, but it kind of shows people how to do parts of the ZATSM using King County's GIS. And so, if we can help people eliminate the bad properties and focus on the others, because I want to educate people, because I don't want them bringing me bad properties. And I sign a contract and 15 minutes later, I'm like, this isn't going to work. I generally give 15-minute free consult for people. So people have a property they're considering, they can reach out to me and I can tell them, hey, these are the things you probably want to look at. Run from this. I have 3 properties. People have over $600,000 in. And I've told them, Issaquah Hobart Road, May Valley Road, go put a free land sign. Free land, right? You want it. I don't know why you bought it. I don't know why you keep spending money on it. Every dollar you spend from now forward is a wasted dollar. You'll get 10 cents back on the dollar. They're still hiring consultants to help them build their way out of it. And it may be possible to lessen the amount they lose, but they're losers. So try and avoid those ones. So anyways, I'll open it up for questions in whatever time we have left here.
Are there different building codes, restrictions, or permitting process as far as if you were to get ahead of yourself and buy the single family, condominiumize it, and then build the 2 back lots versus if you did single family and I did 2 detached ADUs and then condominiumize it afterwards? Is there any difference? You mentioned like fires, the water line needing to be bigger diameter or something like that? Is there?
And
Demands.
yes, exactly. I was trying not to use that word, a different variation, but yeah, I mean, it's been changes where, someone took the city of Kirkland out there and the mayor's like, works great. And we're like, your fire marshal won't allow it. What do you mean? You could do 2, but not 3. So in Kirkland, when you go from 2 to 3 units, it becomes a commercial, right? Now I got to upgrade the home. So, the trouble if you condo minimize before and sell is that if you got to make an adjustment later, you could run into things. We just adopted a new building code, how different places implement that for fire things. So I caution against people doing the condo process too early, or at least selling off. If you still own it, it may cost money. But there's actually, I think, a really good strategy for investors to look at some of these. You can go to someone right now, and if you can buy that home and sell it off, condo, you need 2 things for condo: a survey and the attorney to prepare the declaration, those documents. Costs about $15,000 to $20,000 roughly. So if you can buy the property, sell it for most of what you got for it, not having the backyard, you got that dirt for free for 20 grand. And, then you can go sell it to someone else for 100, 200, 300 grand, so whatever, it depends upon the jurisdiction. I'm not the builder to say part of that, and you get also with interior ADUs, there's things that they'll talk about. You can't cross over spaces between, where the electrical panel is, right? It's got to be in a common place that both people can get to trip it. So there's a whole bunch of building elements too when you get to it.
You do a lot of speaking and teaching in that. Is there any on the lending side of things, like I'd say probably 80% of our residential loans are Fannie Freddie driven, the big agencies. They only allow like 1 ADU. So Freddie will do it for a 2 to 3 family residence. You can do you can have an ADU on Fannie. You can't. You can only have 1 ADU. Is there any insight you have into lending and that part as far as changing, as far as some of the agencies maybe allowing multiple ADUs or?
I'm not I always defer the lending side. But I know people are doing it. How they're doing it, I don't quite know. And I heard someone lender talk the other day who was just saying one house hacking or a structured way of doing it was they were getting like hard money to buy a home, fix it up, condo it, and then they were selling that off, and that didn't separating the ownership from the back part. And so we also get into oftentimes people when they want to condo these things and there's a loan on it, how do you get a partial release?
Yeah, encumbrance.
And we help people to do that. So if there's enough equity into the primary unit to sell off the ADUs or refinancing, but I'm not the one to talk on the financing side.
How do you see this on a national level? Are we our own pocket, kind of like where we, Mississippi or wherever you have in the rest of the U.S. Are they doing? Do you see some of the cities? Are you hearing about some of the same? Or are we kind of our own little unique thing over on the West Coast that's not necessarily gravitated to the rest of the
We're
world?
pretty unique. One thing is you have to have high land values, right? The reason, because ADUs don't in them of themselves really justify. I mean, the break even, if you build an ADU and you're going to rent it out, the break even point is years, right? And so most people don't go try and do that. And so but in Seattle land value, Los Angeles, Portland, so you need a scarce amount of land and high sales or rental values to make it make sense. So they may be allowed in those places. We don't see many of them transpiring. And now Seattle or Washington will be, or any of these others, the number one places feasible to do ADUs because of our new building code or changes in the House bill and our land prices. But going back to certain things, we talked about it before, just because you can do it here, I think there's going to be some sort of line roughly around Newcastle. It's going to be more difficult to go south to make the ADUs pencil, even if you condo them, because it costs the same amount to build. I keep hearing these numbers of anywhere between $400 to $700 a square foot to build an ADU. ADUs are more expensive to build per square foot than any other building. The cheapest part is the air in here, but in an ADU, you got a lot of walls, you got a kitchen, you got a bathroom, you got all the expensive parts of a home in a small space. So if it's going to cost me, say, $550 a square foot to build it, what can I sell it for? And so the sales numbers, it's going to be tough to prove out in Kent and Auburn and Federal Way. So I think Newcastle, Issaquah, Bellevue, Seattle, those places going north, the numbers are going to be there. Just more difficult to go in other areas. What you could rent or sell for. Yep, the resale or rental value. What can you rent an ADU in Covington for? Probably still pretty car dependent. You go to those rural areas, they kind of want generally more property. I mean, it's not like the young professional that wants to move to, I lived in Maple Valley, right? Move to Maple Valley. They still got to drive to Seattle. And so they may want, if they're going to move to Maple Valley, they may want something bigger than that, because that rent may be comparable to something they're going to get closer to Seattle.
Including Tacoma too?
Tacoma's another unique stuff. There's more places in Tacoma. And so I think someone said Lakewood the other way. This guy says Lakewood, but Lakewood only if you're going to go to ADUs in a multifamily zone to get them. But Tacoma will have some areas as well that work. So you can kind of jump there, but it's not going to be Tacoma wide. It's going to be in certain areas of Tacoma. Again, it's about what can I sell that unit for? Probably walkable, maybe to transit or something near North end of Tacoma, Old Town, something like that. So selected areas. Good question.
Well, they're rezoning most of Tacoma right now for duplexes, low scale, high scale residential.
Yep. So the House Bill 1110, we get to the tiers of the city. Tacoma's a tier 1 city, as is Seattle, Kent, Federal Way. They're going to allow, a minimum, on all those units, 4 units on a residential lot. But it goes back to, it depends. Is your lot coverage going to work if something's there? So just because it's allowed doesn't make sense to do. And even the density bonus, they say you can go in Seattle to a 6-plex if you're close to transit, or if you make 1 or 2 of them affordable, depending on, the but I don't know that the cost to build is going to, for what you could sell or rent them for. The affordable units, I don't think are going to make sense to build the additional units. So you just got to shrink down the size of the main units, and you're going to restrict the amount you could rent them or sell them for 50 years.
You started to mention something earlier on, I don't know if you're going to circle back or maybe it had something to do with the ZATSUM on 1 acre. I thought you brought up 1 acre.
1 acre was one of the highlights.
Oh yeah, and the reason why for 1 acre is it's density driven. How many R6, R4, how many units I can get per acre. So that was another thing that just for when you think development, it was often that density count I could get. And so less for accessory dwelling units, but I still make my students learn it, repeat it, and they'll probably be babbling when they're 110 years old, certain things like 43,560. But I had a student say the other day, he was in a job interview with a couple other people in a group, and the person asked him, someone said, who knows how big an acre is? And he's like, 43,560. And everyone turned and looked at him. And so he put that on LinkedIn. He's like, thank you. I elevated myself. And a guy who now is the vice president of acquisitions for one of the nationals went into his interview as a student of mine. And they asked him, if you're looking at a site to develop, here's a site we're looking at developing. Tell us how you would think about it. And he goes, well, I'd look at the zoning and the access. He just did ZATSUM. They hired him. So I just told him I get 10% of every bonus he gets from the rest of his life. So you guys too, you can use ZATSUM as much as you want. You just got to give me credit and 10%. So I'll make the slides. If we don't have any more questions, I won't keep anyone, but I'll be available after people have personal questions. Like sometimes people will bring me a site that they're thinking about, or, again, if you know someone who's looking at land, I'll do a free 15-minute Zoom consultation, time dependent available. The more of these I do, I did one the other day, and then I had 8 people call for one like the next day. And so they were like, but there were 15-minute feasibilities, but 4 of them right away in 15 minutes, they said, I don't want this property anymore. We're canceling feasibility. 2 of them said, well, I'm not as sure about it. And 2 said, well, now I know who I need to go hire or watch for before I decide to buy the property. I need to get this tree looked at. I need the soils looked at.
So looking at real estate agents and that, or sellers and that, it would be good too if someone thinks their property may have other potential to contact you then to be able to see how they could market that or list it.
Yep. Real estate agents are one, they used to say, well, you're a broker. Why am I going to introduce you to my client? They're going to fire me and hire you. And I said, I'm happy to do the feasibility report. I'm guaranteed to get paid. You know, it's not a commission based, and I make your job as the broker easier. You're not licensed. Your license isn't, you know, I carry errors and omissions as a separate company I do this with to do the feasibility. So I'll make your job easier, hopefully help you get a commission sooner or help manage expectations. And a lot of it's, what do we price in the backyard? Is there the ability to price in the appraisal? I'm not going to look at the backyard. Oh, we're going to give them $200,000, even though I know that might be what we could get a developer to pay for it.
I'm sure that, like, since you do feasibility all the time, and this is the bubble I burst inevitably, is clients look at cheap land and want to put a man home on it. That's pretty much a no-go, right? Like if it's cheap land, it's cheap land for a reason.
Almost every time, yes. There's no utilities. It's steep slopes. I mean, people bring me a $100,000 lot of Mercer Island, and I'm like, yeah. I mean, if it's not, if it's below the price of the land, and again, sometimes I just say, sometimes land you just think about being finished 1/3 the value of a finished home, right? The home sells for $900,000. This isn't true, but it's at least a starting point. The land, all finished, should be worth about $300,000. If you're buying land at $75,000, there's a lot of work that would need to bring that thing up to kind of in that realm, right? If it's been on the market 600 days at a really low price, yes, there's probably a reason. Now, if it's on the market first day and it's cheap, let's look at it. Maybe we have a seller that doesn't know what they have and they priced it wrong.
What's your coverage area? Like, where do you?
I try and stay in King, Pierce, a little bit of Snohomish County, but I end up in Chelan, Okanagan. So it depends. Like, what this project is, I'm not the person to do an ADU in Kittitas County. It's just too far away from me. But I do end up doing projects. What's that? It's not, but I don't know all the codes over there. I can figure it out, right? I am doing one over there right now. And I kind of kick myself for saying yes, because a lot of times I say yes because I know they need the help. I don't know who to refer them to. And I sometimes say, I'm just trying to get you to a certain stage that you don't need me. Then you can just go to an architect.
I have a place over there. And I was like, it takes me less time to get there sometimes than around the city.
That's true.
Yep.
Can you repeat who you would need on your team, like the different people that you would need on your team?
Sure, and it depends on the site. Like, you may not need a tree person an arborist if you have no trees. But generally, people you would want to consider having on there is a surveyor, eventually an engineer, civil engineer, a drainage engineer. You're going to want a feasibility person. And a lot of times when I tell people I'm not an arborist, geologist, wetlands biologist. People are like, well, what are you then? I'm like, I'm the quarterback or the coach on the sidelines that's telling you who's going in, who's going out. Don't do a tree study. Here's what we do first. We're going to need a wetlands person. So we want a wetlands person on our team. We may need an attorney. We may need, a banker, an insurance person on it. But let's at least get it in order. Don't do your perk tests until you've done your wetland study. We don't want to dig our test holes in the wetlands. So back to it. So a surveyor, an arborist, feasibility consultant, a wetlands consultant, some sort of a soils person, eventually an engineer, an architect, a builder, someone who knows insurance, someone who knows lending. So,
Sounds expensive.
well, but you don't need that all for feasibility, right? So part of it is in feasibility, we only need these people here. We can look at, there's no wetlands in the area, so we don't need a wetlands person because that's going to be $1,000 to go have a wetland recon done, $3,500 for a full wetland report, right? Do we need that? Maybe, maybe not. So yeah, feasibility can be expensive, and people sometimes will. Again, those people that spent $600,000 to save the probably $15,000 they've probably done up front. Most feasibility reports I do cost between about 80% for a single family lot, or $2,000, $2,500. So more than a home inspection, But I also say that then it doesn't include if we need an arborist or a geologist or a wetlands person. But, if we don't need them, we're going to try not to spend the money. And we also want to not, wait to spend money on those things till we have to. If we find a fatal flaw in the wetlands, we don't need the survey. We don't need the geologist out there.
Everybody forgets, they think, I can build a new house for $500,000, but they forget about bringing in the water lines.
All the soft costs for engineering, permitting, impact fees.
The height requirement part, I saw like 24 feet. Is that,
I think it's a limitation. They're saying that cities that have limitations on height.
Minimum roof height of 24 feet. Places can go higher.
okay, it's like Seattle, what is the height requirement?
I don't know, and they may be there. I heard they're changing it. And there's also things about if you're on the rear line, like on an alley, they may let you go as high as the single family home if you're on an alley or something. So there also may be those numbers there that say that you can, it may be this height here, but if you're over here, you get to go a little bit higher. How they count where the height is it the top of the peak? Is it the middle of the peak as well?
There's an interesting scenario, I think, or example, somebody had in one of your classes, which I didn't realize were certain lots, I think in Seattle or certain jurisdictions where they had, originally they were smaller lots, and then people bought those, and then in time they've become one parcel, but there's still this grandfathering of the original parcels where now there's some lots that you can figure that out, and now.
And that's another, it depends. So Seattle was platted a lot of 50 by 100 lots, 30 by 100 lots. People bought multiple of those, built one home. Maybe the home was on the line, and you can resurrect those. You may buy, you see in a legal description, you bought lots 13, 14, 15 of, Husky Edition, right? Those are individual lots. Now, there's times when people re-aggregated those and eliminated those, and other times that maybe the county or the city did it for tax purposes. It used to be that you had to write a check out of your checkbook. They only got 20 checks. You guys remember that. My students remember having a checkbook. But, I remember my grandparents asking get one tax bill for multiple. They had multiple vacant lots. We only want to write one check for them. They didn't intend to re-aggregate the lots into one tax lot, but sometimes that occurred. And so if you intentionally did it, now you have one tax lot. If you didn't intentionally do it, you can go arguably resurrect those lots and get individual lots on those. So it's another kind of house hacking, lot hacking strategy.
What's the minimum lot size?
It depends, right? And so minimum lot size in certain areas, and Seattle's looking at that because they have a different thing coming out that it had to meet the minimum for zoning or zone, and that's going to be dependent upon the jurisdiction. And some of those may be getting rid of those. If they have some substandard lots. King County in the rural area is really difficult to get ADUs on lots that don't meet today's standards. And so if you don't meet, so if you're in the RA5 zone, if you're not 3.75 acres in size, you may not be able to, you may be only do an AADU. And if you're below a certain size, it's a legal lot. Maybe you're subdivided old code that they won't even allow an ADU on it. They're talking about changing that. So depends on the jurisdiction.
As a lender, I'm gonna start looking at non-conforming condo requirements that we can do.
And I've heard people doing these smaller 4-1s and not running into an issue. And again, I'm not on the lender side, but I know people, look at Seattle, they're doing it. So it's not like it's just other jurisdictions. When they want to get to appraisals is going to be challenging too. In Seattle, the first wave of these is done. The second wave is going on. Appraisals are not hard on condo ADUs. Kirkland, they're doing it. They haven't seen them in Renton and Auburn and these other jurisdictions. So appraisals will be another thing. It'll be a challenge for these.
And risk is always just probably 30% down.
If it's being sold as a condo, I don't think, long as it's 4 or less units, you shouldn't have issues because they're just individual condos. And as far as condo approval, it's only 5 or more units you need condo approval for Fannie and Freddie. So you're fine with that.
I am running into one with an insurance thing that we're trying to work through.
Yeah, the insurance is pretty much the only thing that they need.
So we have a new build where right now they don't have master insurance policy on. So they're trying to work it through because it's only covered through the builder right now. So they haven't transitioned to one. So they're trying to see if his insurance policy will cover us enough because it's post-build now to get us get approved to close. But we're still waiting on it.
Where I'm curious is talking on the national level to see like the Fannie Freddie, like if someone has an ADU and they haven't condoized it yet, and the city allows 2 ADUs onto a property, then if an agent or someone's putting that up for sale, you're gonna have a problem for conventional financing because Fannie and Freddie only allow for 1 ADU on a single family. So, and if it's isolated to us mainly on the West Coast, we're just a drop in the bucket. I don't see a Fannie Freddie changing their lending stuff. But as far as once it's condoized, there's not a whole lot of problems. The only problems we've run into is where somebody condoizes it, that original single-family residence, it may have had an ADU in it, and they're now selling it, and they're listing it as like a single family, even though it's legally, it's now a condo, but it's a condo with an ADU, and there's just not comparables out there. We've only seen that in a couple cases, but the other 2 or 3 units they have, we can do the financing on fine. It's just that original one that they kept as a condo with an ADU. That's a one-off that we can't do. We run into problems at least. So.
Okay.
It's a one-off that we've seen 3 times already in the last couple months.
All right.
All around here.
Okay.
Kingstone-ish, but yeah, so.
Well, good. I will be around if people have questions afterwards. Other than that, I think we're kind of at the time we talked about, so I'll let you guys get back to your day. Thank you. I have cards up here too. If people want a card. Yep. I'll also send this around. You guys can keep that. That's the video that I did with Terry. Another one on